It was a house that seemed to embody peace, a place where a young couple nurtured their new baby, surrounded by neighbors who rarely questioned what happened behind its closed doors. Yet, on a night no one saw coming, an act of unimaginable brutality shattered every illusion of normalcy. A man, driven by doubt and suspicion, left behind a crime scene so harrowing that it sent shockwaves through the community. How could one decision, one piece of information, unravel the very foundations of a family so tragically? Welcome to True Crime Acts, your portal to uncovering the dark realities behind crimes that strike at the heart of everyday life. In this series, we explore the twisted paths leading to unspeakable acts, shedding light on the fragile lines between trust, betrayal, and devastating consequences. If you find our work compelling, be sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to remain connected to our unfolding investigations. Inside, a young couple shares the space with their 4-month-old son. On the wall, a family photo from the hospital after the baby's birth hangs in a simple frame. The father stands nearby, one hand resting on that photo, his eyes clouded with an unease he refuses to voice. His partner, humming softly, balances the infant on her hip, swaying him to sleep. On the surface, it seems like a warm domestic scene, yet a subtle tension lingers. As dusk settles, the infant's cries fade to quiet gurgles, and the mother places him gently in a crib adorned with cartoon-themed bedding. The father, pretending calm, kisses the baby's forehead before slipping into the hallway. There, he pauses outside the nursery door, shoulders tense. In a mirror's reflection, viewers glimpse his troubled expression. Something about the child's features, or perhaps the timeline of his conception, nags at him. Later, they reconvene in the living room, illuminated by a single floor lamp casting long shadows on the walls. Their conversation is minimal, how the day was, whether the baby has enough formula. Yet there's a palpable gap. He offers curt replies and she returns anxious glances. Neither addresses the simmering dread unspoken between them. His growing suspicion that the child may not be his. Her fear of what he might do if that suspicion is confirmed. Are they already standing on the brink of disaster, each night drawing them closer to a truth too painful to confront? The father enters with a tense greeting, his shoulders hunched as though bearing a secret weight. He pours coffee into a mug but doesn't meet her eyes. She attempts a smile, offering him a plate of scrambled eggs she's just made, yet he merely mumbles a thank you. His mind seems elsewhere, perhaps already on the paternity test kit he secretly ordered and is waiting to arrive. During the day, the mother tries to maintain normalcy. She sits on the living room floor with the baby, rattling a toy shaped like a friendly lion. The father, working from home for the morning, peeks into the living room but doesn't step inside. Instead, he retreats to another room, presumably to focus on work calls. The mother's face falls slightly as she notices how quickly he disappears. By lunchtime, the house feels weighted by unspoken worries. The father's replies are monosyllabic when the mother asks if he wants something to eat. She busies herself with the baby's routine, feedings, diaper changes, lullabies, while he remains preoccupied. Occasionally, she musters the courage to approach him, but the tension in his demeanor is like a wall. She hesitates to pry, uncertain if pressing him will spark a conflict or bring them closer to the truth. Is their reluctance to speak fueling a rift that will grow impossible to repair? Or might an honest conversation still provide a lifeline before suspicions harden into resentment? Something had shifted in the father's demeanor over the past few days. Where he once hovered protectively around the baby, he now seemed hesitant, as though each cry or coo reminded him of the doubts he refused to voice. In fleeting moments, he'd stare at the infant with an expression torn between affection and unease. The mother, sensing the tension, tried to break down his wall with gentle questions. Would you like to feed him? Did you notice he's smiling more now? But the father's answers came back hollow. That night, after the baby finally drifted to sleep, the couple settled into the living room. The television played a muted sitcom, offering them a distraction they didn't truly want. Between commercials, he'd glance at her as though preparing to speak, only to let the moment slip away. She tried to bring up small talk, how the baby's latest checkup went, what groceries they needed. But it was clear neither of them dared mention the undercurrent of distrust. Eventually, the mother ventured a tentative question about why he seemed so distant. He swallowed hard, eyes flicking to the baby monitor as if the child might overhear. Instead of answering, he shrugged and blamed fatigue. The mother's gaze dropped to the floor, and she pressed her lips together to keep from asking more. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees and rattling the window, yet the real storm brewed between them. A quiet, creeping gulf fueled by secrets neither could bring themselves to name. Could a heartfelt admission or a single honest exchange bridge the widening gap, or were they inching toward a crisis that even truth might be too late to avert? When the DNA test kit finally arrived, the father felt a strange mixture of dread and relief. The plain brown box in his hands symbolized a crossroads. Soon he would know, beyond any doubt, whether his suspicions were justified. He carefully tucked the kit into a drawer, praying the mother wouldn't notice the label. Yet, she sensed his agitation the moment he walked in from the porch, her eyes following him as he stashed the envelope out of sight. Throughout the day, he found reasons to be alone. Once, in the bathroom, he stared at his reflection in the mirror before finally swabbing his cheek. He sealed the sample with unsteady fingers, his heart pounding as if even the slightest sound might give him away. Anxiety pressed in from all sides. What would happen if the test confirmed his fears? Could he look his son in the eye if he discovered a betrayal had formed the foundation of their family? That evening, the mother tried to engage him in simple conversation while preparing dinner, but his mind was miles away. He gave her half answers, eyes drifting toward the drawer where the test kit box once lay. Their baby, sensing the unease, cried more than usual, adding another layer of stress to the household. With each wail, the father grimaced, torn between wanting to comfort his son and doubting if he could continue pretending all was normal. If the results shattered his already fragile faith, would there be any path left to preserve this family, or was the truth destined to unleash consequences they couldn't possibly contain? As the father awaited the DNA test results, his nights grew longer and his sleep more elusive. The steady tick of the clock in the hallway amplified his anxieties. He replayed every detail he found suspicious, a timeline that didn't add up, subtle ways the baby's features resembled neither parent, and hushed phone calls the mother had once taken in another room. In truth, nothing was substantial, yet it felt damning enough in his mind. The mother, too, sensed a crack in their home's foundation. She tried to keep life running smoothly, feedings, laundry, cuddling the baby, but her eyes betrayed an underlying sadness. She was used to leaning on the father during these taxing early months, yet now it felt as though he stood on the other side of a chasm. The tension weighed on them both, turning every routine task into a test of patience and composure. One evening, her curiosity drove her to question him directly. "Is something wrong? You've been so distant." He swallowed hard, words catching in his throat. He wanted to confess about the DNA test, to admit he was suffocating under suspicions he couldn't verify, but fear of confrontation paralyzed him. Instead, he dodged her concern with a weak smile claiming exhaustion. The mother's eyes watered, but she said nothing more, seemingly resigned to the silence strangling their relationship. Was their love strong enough to brave an inevitable reckoning, or would the secret he carried destroy their bond before they could find the truth? His heart pounded with each step back inside. Once the mother left the room, he tore open the envelope, eyes darting hungrily over the lines of data. The words on the page both confirmed and negated his entire life. He was indeed the biological father. Relief should have flooded him, but something else lurked beneath that sense of vindication. Anger at the mental turmoil he had endured, resentment for the emotional toll on their fragile family life. Feeling conflicted, he stuffed the test results in a drawer and tried to carry on as if nothing had changed. However, the weight of his suspicion didn't magically vanish. Instead, it curdled into guilt and a strange form of rage. Rage for the nights he'd lost to sleepless worry, for the distance that now separated him from the mother. She, in turn, noticed a peculiar tightness in his posture, a new edge to his tone when he spoke. Their son, fussing in his playpen, seemed sensitive to the lingering tension. Later that day, she confronted him again about his aloofness. He hesitated, torn between showing her the envelope and pretending everything was still unresolved. In that pivotal moment, words failed him. Instead, he let his frustration slip out in curt remarks, shutting down her attempts at conversation. The mother retreated with teary eyes, leaving him alone at the kitchen table, the envelope a silent testament to his lingering confusion. Could the truth he yearned for have arrived too late? Or might an honest admission yet bridge the gap their suspicions carved into the very heart of their home? Tension, weeks in the making, exploded into a confrontation. The father's frustration over his silent torment and the mother's exasperation with his persistent coldness collided in a flurry of accusations. She demanded to know why he'd become so distant, tears glistening as she recounted the late nights she'd handled alone, the uncertain hush they lived in daily. The father, tired of his own guilt, retaliated by accusing her of not being honest, of fueling his suspicion with guarded behavior. Their voices rose, disturbing the baby, whose whimpers sharpened the edge of their words. The mother tried to soothe him, but the father pressed on, lashing out with the anger he'd bottled up. She retaliated with her own allegations. Had he ever bothered to talk to her about what was really troubling him, or did he prefer brooding in silence? Each question felt like a dagger. At one point, she noticed the envelope sticking out of a drawer. Realization swept over her features. He'd found the means to confirm his doubts, yet told her nothing. A surge of betrayal contorted her expression. Why, she asked, had he chosen to torture them both if he already knew the child was his? He had no answer. Rage and regret battled within him. Their shouting ceased only when the baby wailed so loudly they had to pause. Breathless, hearts pounding, they stood there, the gulf between them seemingly insurmountable. Could they salvage the love they once shared, or had suspicion and bitterness forged a rift too deep for apologies to mend? After the explosive fight, they retreated into separate rooms to breathe. The baby's cries eventually subsided, granting them a semblance of calm. Late into the night, they found themselves in the living room again, drained and silent. The father stared at the ceiling, the mother fiddled with the hem of her shirt. Their earlier shouts echoed in their minds, but both felt a flicker of regret. Surprisingly, the father made the first gesture. Reaching into the drawer, he retrieved the envelope, the paternity results, and handed it to her. She opened it with shaking hands, scanning the data that confirmed he was indeed the biological father. Tears threatened again, but this time they carried relief and sorrow. She couldn't believe he had kept this to himself. He, meanwhile, confessed that he'd hoped the news would dispel his fears, yet guilt and anger over wasted nights consumed him. For the first time in weeks, they spoke honestly. She apologized for not sensing the depth of his doubts. He apologized for letting suspicion corrode his trust. The words came haltingly, laced with the residual sting of their fight, but each sentence felt like a tiny bridge over the chasm dividing them. Their conversation stretched long, touching on how they'd let anxiety overshadow their joy in raising their child. Would this new honesty be enough to heal the wounds they'd inflicted on each other? Or had the damage run too deep for a single night of truth to undo the cracks in their fragile foundation? The day after their night of honesty held promise but also uncertainty. They tried to navigate the usual routines, diaper changes, feeding schedules, and household chores. With an underlying question hovering, could they truly move forward now that the lie of suspicion had been exposed? The mother, heartened by the father's willingness to share the paternity test, attempted to close the emotional gap through small kindnesses, like fixing his morning coffee just the way he liked it, or humming softly to the baby in the next room so he could catch a breath. Yet wounds this deep didn't vanish overnight. Remnants of hurt remained. The father still felt pangs of guilt for allowing doubt to overshadow his love for both mother and child. The mother struggled with her own bitterness, unsure if she should have recognized the father's turmoil sooner. While they talked more openly, their conversations frequently brushed past painful memories, as though both feared reigniting the spark of conflict that had so recently consumed them. Still, their newfound openness provided glimmers of hope. In quiet intervals, they shared stories of how they used to envision family life, dreams of vacations, shared milestones, watching their son grow. Even if these dreams now felt fragile, recalling them together reminded them of the bond that once united them. Nighttime found them side by side on the couch, the baby asleep in the nursery. They watched an old sitcom, occasionally stealing glances at each other, as though rediscovering a connection beneath the scars. Would this delicate reconciliation prove enough to sustain them, Or would fresh challenges test whether their shared love could withstand the shadows cast by suspicion? Over the ensuing weeks, the household settled into a more peaceful rhythm. Mornings brought the usual bustle, bottle warming, lullabies, and sleepy-eyed family breakfasts, but the air no longer buzzed with unspoken resentments. Their child thrived on the renewed harmony, smiling and babbling as though sensing the calmer energy. The father, freed from the burden of suspicion, embraced fatherhood with a fresh perspective, and the mother, relieved to see him return to his caring self, responded with patience and genuine warmth. That's not to say the journey was seamless. Occasional flares of tension reminded them of the fragility of trust. If the father felt a twinge of worry about finances, or the mother grew overwhelmed by the baby's restless nights, either might revisit old doubts and insecurities. Yet they discovered that talking, really talking, could diffuse those moments. A walk around the neighborhood, or a quiet chat in the nursery, often brought them back to the newfound honesty forged after their worst confrontation. Their ordeal became a turning point. Surviving the strain of possible betrayal and crushing suspicion showed them that, in confronting vulnerability, they'd found a stronger sense of closeness. Together, they vowed never again to let unspoken fears poison their relationship. On days when the baby napped, they ventured small projects, like redecorating the nursery with cheerful colors or meal prepping for the week. Simple tasks reinforcing teamwork. Step by step, they rebuilt the love that once felt lost. Yet, their story stands as a stark reminder. Secrets and doubt left unchecked can lead even loving families toward heartbreak. If they hadn't faced the truth when they did, how differently might this story have ended? In the wake of this devastating crime, the echoes of heartbreak and unthinkable violence remain. What began as unaddressed doubt escalated into a tragic loss no one could have imagined. The lessons are as haunting as the silence left behind. Secrets and unresolved fears can twist love into something unrecognizable, with harrowing results. For families, friends, and even casual observers, this is a chilling reminder of the importance of open communication and honest support. If someone near you is grappling with overwhelming emotions or silent suspicions, a single conversation or gesture of concern may be enough to prevent tragedy. Thank you for joining us for this gripping episode of True Crime Acts. If you found this story eye-opening, please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to stay connected to our investigations. Together, through awareness and action, we can work toward a world where such horrors become rarities rather than devastating realities.